some community agreements that I hope you join me in for the night. So as we engage tonight in an important discussion, I'd like to, one, thank you for joining, and I hope that you also are engaged and that you ask questions. We will have a Q&A area available for you later on today. Embrace new ideas and discomfort. Expect and accept non-disclosure on this topic, right? But also respect people's privacy at the same time. So if something is shared by one of our panelists or while you're mixing and mingling in the room, please respect that and take in what people are saying, but don't allow it to leave outside of this room. I want you to listen with the intent to learn, and not knowing is definitely welcome. That's why you're here today. That's why we're joining in community. Acknowledge and celebrate all of our differences. And last but not least, close with an ellipse, not a period. Please continue on this conversation when you leave from this room, whether it be with us again or with someone else in the future. This cannot be a one-stop shop. This has to be an ongoing conversation, especially if we're trying to create change on campus. We need to keep the momentum going, whether it's momentum you came into this room with or momentum you're leaving this room with. Please keep it going, please keep it up. For those of you who are joining us on Zoom, we do have captions available for you, so feel free to utilize the caption. You can find that at the bottom on your toolbar. You will also notice if you're joining us on Zoom that the chat feature is disabled, but you are able to ask us questions during the Q&A session. Towards the end, you will see the Q&A feature also at the toolbar. We do have some quick order of business to follow. So again, Zoom functions. No chat, don't use the chat. You can't use the chat, but we do again want you to ask questions. So you'll see at the bottom a Q&A portion. We will have a Q&A section at the end, and there are captions available. So we want to make sure that you have captions when you need them, if and when you need them. Oh, we touched on that. Okay, so that's it for the projector. We can mute the projector. Thank you. So today we will be discussing topics of sexual and gender-based violence and supporting those who may have experienced violence. If at any point you need a breather, you can step away from this meeting and rejoin if and when you are ready. Remember that you know your limits best. You're the only one who knows your limits, and do what's best for you. Please make self-care a priority for you in this space. We do have the lovely Kiswana. Kiswana's gonna wave in the back of the room. Again, if you do need a breather and you need to step out of this room physically, in 407 Barnard, so right outside and to your right, you will meet Kiswana in the lovely room. Kiswana is one of our confidential resources. But even if you don't need a breather and you just want to color, we got coloring books over there. We got some Play-Doh. Everything you need, stress balls, is in that room. So feel free to stop by and take what you need as well, or pop in and speak with Kiswana if needed. We also have resources listed on each of the tables. If you have not already taken a picture of those resources, it lists your confidential and non-confidential resources. If you need it while you are in this room or as you leave this room, again, resources are here and are available for you. For our in-person attendees, I will be walking around shortly to give you each raffle tickets. We are raffling off 3 books by Chanel Miller, All Know My Name. You will hear about that a little bit later about why that book was chosen from our Clery interns, but we will give you all raffle tickets so that you can go ahead and take that book home with you. So now to tell you a little bit about myself besides my name and my position. I had never considered violence prevention work as a career path. Not at all, not in the slightest. I didn't even realize what it was or that it existed until attending college. Colleges like Barnard that cared about violence prevention and that had people on the college that cared about violence prevention and that deeply cared about health and wellness and the well-being of our students. However, it is a career path that, though I didn't know it, is one that I'm grateful to be in and to have found myself in. As someone that isn't a stranger to the effects of violence, I'm also grateful that all of you are joining me in this space, are joining me in a community that cares and that wants to make a difference and that wants to learn more. This topic is about the importance of intersectionality, focusing on the dialogue of sexual assault because it is Sexual Assault Awareness Month. Intersectionality was coined originally by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. It describes the ways in which individual identities of gender, race, ethnicity, sexual orientation, gender identity, disability, class, and more intersect with one another, and they overlap with one another. In turn, these intersections create unique experiences of discrimination and oppression. We cannot forget that. Okay, they are created based on power and control and systems that are created to oppress others, especially those who are marginalized. Intersectionality also analyzes the inequality of systems in place and its impact on individual groups and individuals and groups. As mentioned earlier, April is Sexual Assault Awareness and Prevention Month. Sexual assault can happen to anyone, regardless of your age, your gender, your race, where you're located, who you're hanging out with, what you're wearing. It can happen, unfortunately. And unfortunately, it happens more than we'd like to admit, even more so to those who are marginalized or from marginalized communities. These systems that are rooted in power and control, they highlight the areas and intersections with racism, sexism, ableism, homophobia, transphobia, and more. For those of you who really enjoy numbers and you need to know what the numbers are in order to really understand how big of a problem this is, women ages, or those who identify as women ages 18 to 24 who are college students, are 3 times more likely than women in general to experience sexual violence. About 3% of American men that we know of, because we also know that men do not report as much, have experienced or an attempted or completed rape in their lifetime. And these are statistics from RAINN. Male college age students, 18 to 24, 78% more likely than non-college age students to be victims of rape or sexual assault. 23.1% of transgender, genderqueer, and gender nonconforming individuals are also, especially college students, are likely to have been sexually assaulted. 39%, according to the CDC, female victims of rape had a disability at a time of the rape. So again, highlighting that no matter what your gender is, no matter what your race is, no matter what your ability is, unfortunately, people are experiencing sexual assault. Tonight's space is one in action, one dedicated towards action, especially towards creating an environment free of violence, because anything over 0 is too high. As mentioned in our community guideline, this conversation cannot end with a period. During tonight's evening in the panel, you'll hear from professionals from different career sectors, nonprofit, higher education, healthcare and medical care, and in spite of their different fields, the importance of intersectionality cannot be overstated when it comes to responding to sexual and gender-based violence. I also want to thank Mr. and Mrs. Clery for creating this amazing opportunity, for their ongoing support and commitment to violence prevention. I want to give a huge round of applause, so please, round of applause, to the Clery interns, for all their help. Thank you both for your hard work, your time, your knowledge, your dedication, your passion for violence and prevention, and the willingness to incorporate it into everything that you do. It's so inspiring. You both have such an amazing, incredible future that will take you so far, whether or not you stay an intern or your last year at Barnard, because they're both juniors. To Kristen Kennedy and my predecessors in this role, managing the Clery Lectures, thank you for laying the groundwork for the foundation and for trusting me with it. I appreciate you each more than you know. I also want to thank everyone in this space. I also want to wish that everyone in this space can have coworkers that are so amazing as them, and I really mean that. They are gems across the board. I want to thank my family, my friends, my coworkers who have turned to my friends and my family for their continuous support, for reminding me that imposter syndrome is not all of who I am, but just an aspect of who I am due to a system created to marginalize others and to marginalize people who look like me. So as you leave this room today, I ask that you continue the desire to learn, that the conversation reinforces that this is not a one-track problem, this is not a one-size problem, and this cannot be a one-size-fits-all solution. We are all unique. So please do check in with yourself. Kiswana will be available to you at any point in time. And at this point, I want to now introduce the Clery interns.
Hello everyone, my name is Fiona Cho. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm currently a junior at Barnard College majoring in education. Along with Alexa, I'm one of the 2 Clery interns for the 2022-2023 school year, and it's so lovely to have you all joining us for this important conversation. First and foremost, I want to take the time to thank Mrs. Constance Clery, Barnard class of 1953, for partnering with Barnard and making this opportunity possible. It is easy to feel powerless and overwhelmed when we think about ways to combat sexual violence. But Mrs. Clery's work through the Clery Center reminds us all that there is so much strength we can draw from creating policies, establishing resources and spaces, and educating ourselves on violence prevention. Mrs. Clery's work with violence prevention began when her 19-year-old daughter, Jeanne, a freshman at Lehigh University, was raped and murdered in her dorm room in 1986. Channeling their grief and frustrations into lobbying and advocacy work, the Clarys founded the Clery Center for Campus Safety on college campuses and pushed for the passage of the very important Clery Act. Under the Clery Act, all colleges and universities receiving federal funds are required to release crime statistics and security reports, as well as send student bodies alerts about potential threats to safety. The remarkable work that Mr. and Mrs. Clery have done to make college campuses safer and prevent what happened to their daughter from happening to students from other campuses across the country is a testament to their extraordinary compassion and resilience. Hearing Mrs. Clery's story touched me in a way that continually inspires me in the work I do. Her work reminded me of the importance in actively and intentionally centering individuals who have experienced sexual violence and gender-based violence, whether it's through educating students on their rights and responsibilities to providing support after an incident. In order to do so, I selected the campaign theme, Believe Survivors, for our academic year and integrated a trauma-informed approach in all of the initiatives we have created. In November, I hosted a trivia tabling event, which involves students answering questions related to sexual assault and violence prevention. Students were able to learn about the nuances of experiencing and addressing this type of violence, from engaging with the idea of affirmative consent, which means yes, to making distinctions between confidential and non-confidential resources on campus. I was thrilled to coordinate events that stimulated student learning in regard to violence prevention and campus safety. This internship is at the perfect intersection of my passion for education and my passion for advocacy and social good. And I've never been more acutely aware of the power that education has in bringing communities together and promoting their well-being. Among other insights, I hope you will leave our talk today with the realization that violence prevention is truly a collective effort along the intersectional lines of race, class, gender, sexuality, and other identities. The opportunity to promote violence prevention on Barnard's campus also combined my passion with education for my passion for event planning. I'm grateful for the diverse network of people I got to meet and the events I got to participate in through this role. A big thank you to our supervisor, Zaisha, who is the program coordinator for prevention and education at Barnard, for making sure the planning process was always running smoothly, as well as being a huge source of knowledge about everything related to violence prevention. I also want to thank my coworker, Alexa, and everyone in the Barnard Health and Wellness offices, as well as the Office of Non-Discrimination and Title IX, who I was able to talk to and gain valuable insight from. And I also want to thank our 3 speakers who are doing such important work on campus as well. Although my work is meant to encourage learning about violence prevention within the Barnard community, I have learned so much in the process as well. Thank you. And now I'll hand it over to Alexa, my coworker.
Hello, everyone, and thank you, Fiona, for your wonderful introduction. I'm Alexa Lamy. I use a She series, and I'm a junior at Barnard College studying applied math and one of the Clery interns for this academic year. I first discovered the Clery Act in high school when researching the Title IX reporting process and was curious about the incidence of reports in my school district. I was honored when my supervisor at the time inquired whether I would be interested in the position, given both the significance in my understanding of what constitutes campus safety, and as a college student who is intimately familiar with Clery crime alerts that arrive when violent crimes occur near or on campus, a product of the noble efforts of Mrs. and Mr. Clery in response to the tragic death of their daughter. I have been involved in sexual assault prevention efforts since high school, following multiple incidences of sexual assault on my high school campus that prompted an investigation by the Office of Civil Rights for their violations of Title IX. This piqued my interest in the reporting process in sexual violence prevention, and following my own investigation and collection of student feedback, I designed a violence prevention curriculum, which continues to be mandatory in my district today. I sustained this work in college, both as a peer advocate with Columbia Sexual Violence Response and in my role as a Clery intern. In addition to organizing this event, Fiona and I have supported Being Barnard in other efforts, gathering feedback from students at tablings throughout the semester, and presenting at the Barnard Bold Conference, where we discuss trauma-informed approaches in the classroom. Today, the topic of our discussion is intersectionality, how some marginalized communities are disproportionately victimized when it comes to sexual and relationship violence. We believe that through listening and learning from the experience of survivors who hold different identities, we can create an inclusive and trauma-informed environment to best help those who have experienced violence. There exist a number of barriers that may prevent a survivor from reporting or seeking help. These include feelings of shame, guilt, embarrassment, the perceived negative consequences of reporting, or the fear of retaliation by a perpetrator. However, when supporting individuals who hold marginalized identities, it is important to recognize and account for the additional barriers they face. Finally, I would like to thank all who have supported me throughout this internship. First and foremost, I would like to thank my supervisors, Asia, for her guidance and patience throughout the process of organizing this event, as well as my incredible coworker, Fiona. Thank you to the many from the Barnard Health and Wellness and Non-Discrimination offices, not only for their championship, but for their promotion of the health and well-being of students campus-wide. And finally, a big thank you to our panelists this evening as well. I will now begin by introducing our first panelist, Dr. Elizabeth Scott Francis. She is the Executive Director of Cares and Outreach and Response and the Title IX Coordinator at Barnard. She has worked in higher education and student affairs for over a decade at institutions across the country. She previously served as a board member of the Virginia Domestic Violence Action Alliance's Campus Task Force, a committee of college administrators focused on programming and outreach related to sexual violence prevention. Additionally, she was on the board of the Virginia Red Flag Advisory Committee and developed content around the Red Flag Campaign, a bystander intervention campaign designed for college campuses. Elizabeth received her doctorate in organizational leadership and policy with a focus in higher education from Vanderbilt University, her master's in student affairs practice from the University of Virginia, and her bachelor's in gender, sexuality, and women's studies and theater from the College of William and Mary.
And then I'll introduce our two other panelists. Rafi A. Rios is Black, Puerto Rican, and non-binary, born and raised in the Bronx, New York City. Rafi is the supervising manager of hotline and training programs within the New York City Anti-Violence Project, also known as AVP, where their focus is operating AVP's 24-hour bilingual anti-violence hotline, serving LGBTQ+ and HIV-affected survivors of violence. Rafi is also president of NYC Gamers, a 501c3 nonprofit organization providing information, education, and advocacy across the intersections of race, gender, and sexuality throughout gaming communities. And last but not least, Dr. Elijah Salzer has practiced obstetrics and gynecology as a physician assistant for 30 years. He is a clinical professor at the Pace University Lenox Hill Hospital, Department of Physician Assistant Studies in New York. He graduated from the LIU Brooklyn PA program with highest honors and completed the Montefiore Medical Center postgraduate PA residency in obstetrics and gynecology. Dr. Salzer received the Doctor of Medical Science degree from the University of Lynchburg. He has been invited to lecture on topics in obstetrics and gynecology at international, national, and state and local conferences, and is a guest lecturer in numerous PA programs. Dr. Salzer also practices gynecology at Eastchester Medical Associates in the Bronx and is a sexual assault forensic examiner, also known as SAFE, at the Mount Sinai Medical Center in New York. So now we'll take the stage to start our panel. Another round of applause for our speakers, please. Thank you to our three lovely speakers for joining us today. We have some questions prepared for our speakers, but we also have time for Q&A at the end, both for people here in person as well as people on Zoom. So stay tuned for that. But we'll begin by asking some questions that Alexa and I prepared for the panelists. We first want to give each panelist a chance to introduce themselves. So could you please tell us about yourself and the work that each of you do as it relates to sexual/gender-based violence? If you also want to talk about how you began to get into this work, that would also be great. Feel free to answer in any order that you feel is comfortable.
I'll go first. Do folks hear me? Yes. Hi. Okay, so I'm Rafi. I think that the best place to start is with how my journey began doing this work. Born and raised in the Bronx from a Puerto Rican family, I had a lot of difficulty on my own self-exploration journey when it came to my gender, my sexuality, my race, a lot of factors that make up who I am today. And if it wasn't for the mountains that I had to climb in order to accept the multifaceted parts that make me who I am today, I wouldn't be here speaking today. And I think that it's important to bring that into the energy of this panel and this amazing event, because so often with the work I do with AVP's hotline, a hotline call will start with someone just kind of giving their name. Maybe they'll give some surface level, like, I use she, her pronouns. Maybe I'm a college student, right? And as they continue having this conversation with one of our hotline volunteers or an AVP staff person, they'll test the waters for safety and they'll realize, all right, I can also let you know that I'm queer. Oh, I can also let you know that I'm Black, queer, disabled, a college student in a campus in Upper Manhattan, and I experienced this violence and I'm looking for support and I don't know where to go. I want to know what my options are. Who can I talk to? I carry that with me in everything that I am and all the work that I do, because I know what it's like to be on the other side of that phone call. And I aspire to move to a place in this movement where folks can pick up a phone or send a text, walk into a room, and bring the fullness of themselves into the space and not have to take those early safety planning steps in figuring out what parts of me can I carry with me into the emergency room or into the intake. Thank you.
I'll go next in the interest of moving down the line. So I initially got interested in this work as a 19-year-old college student, actually in a very similar position to the two Clery interns. So I was searching for a work-study job on my campus, and one of the jobs that was available was the golf cart, or the health promotion golf cart coordinator. And that job was responsible for doing essentially a cash cab for students going to class that involved them answering healthy relationships trivia questions during that ride. And I was responsible for polling students, giving out birth control devices like condoms and resources and information. And as a person from a town with 500 people and one stoplight, that was awe-inspiring for me to realize that I could work with a professional that got to do that full time. And so that really piqued my interest and ultimately ended me up in higher education, in well-being promotion, and then specifically in non-discrimination and Title IX work, and safety promotion on campus more broadly. In the work that I do now in the CARES department on campus is focused primarily within the CARES response unit, as well as the non-discrimination and Title IX unit. And specifically in non-discrimination and Title IX, what I do is work with community members, students, faculty, and staff to explore their rights, options, and then any available support. And so I will tell folks when they come in to speak with me, or when they want to, kind of like Rafi mentioned, to test the waters and see what feels safe, that folks can share as much or as little as they want. And that's really how we start the conversation. That's why I'm here, and that's how I got here. And thank you for asking me to be a part of this.
When I was in PA school, a long time ago, I had little to no interest in obstetrics and gynecology, ironically. Some of you may be interested in going into medicine, and you may not know about the PA profession, and I won't bother you with its history. But PAs don't have to specialize in one field forever. And that's one of the reasons I became a PA and decided not to go to medical school. I thought I was going to go into internal medicine, and my fourth clerkship was in obstetrics and gynecology. In the first hour, I was so compelled by the lecture on the physiology of pregnancy that I knew I'd found what I would do the rest of my career. And I've never done anything else. During that clerkship, I was paired with a second-year resident who had trained outside the US, had practiced in the United Kingdom, was an excellent surgeon, an excellent diagnostician, not the nicest person in the world. And we were on call together. We were called down to the emergency department to see a patient who was about 26, who had been through sexual assault and was now in the ER for collection of evidence and management of her injuries. She had suffered a skull fracture. She had a collapsed lung that she was bleeding into. And I was there for the exam and collection of evidence. And after all of that, I watched this resident tell this patient that she was lying to us, that she had not been sexually assaulted because there was no injury to her gynecologic tissues, to her reproductive tract. That case still haunts me. It's 31 years ago this year. And it haunts me because I was absolutely paralyzed. I knew it was untrue. I didn't know how to countermand the resident as a student. And I thought to myself, I can do better than that. And when there was no SAFE at that time, sexual assault forensic examiner, that didn't exist. And so when the opportunity came to have that licensure and to work at Mount Sinai in the capacity, I took that opportunity. That's why I do this work. But I do, it's a small part of what I do. I do talk about this extensively in my lectures, in OBGYN, and with my patients as well, in my practice.
Thank you to our panelists for sharing about how they got started in doing this type of work. We understand that all three of you are working in different spaces, but we feel like there's definitely that trauma-informed approach that guides all of you in the work that you do. And we recognize that commonality is really important. And on that note, because our theme and because our topic for tonight is intersectionality, we want to hear your thoughts on the theme. So how would each of you describe the intersection between sexual or gender-based violence and other identities such as race, gender, and sexuality?
They're all looking at me. The more I practice, the more I teach, living in the world in which we're living now, I think that the evils of our nation can really be summarized as greed for power, greed for money, racism and misogyny, and others, of course, within that as well, transphobia, homophobia, et cetera, et cetera. But I think they're really all part of the same thing. One of the things that I stress when I talk to patients and students is that sexual assault is never about sexual gratification. It is about power, it is about violence. And so I think, and I'm not an expert in intersectionality, I do appreciate it, I am learning more about it, but I think the fact that we're talking about marginalized communities, and Dr. Wright very eloquently spoke about your research in 19th century America and in the freedom of enslaved people, particularly enslaved women who suffered, and their progeny, their descendants continue to suffer disproportionately. Because again, if it's about power and violence, it's about controlling those people who are marginalized.
I think when I think about how intersectionality and understanding informs the work that I do in non-discrimination and Title IX on campus. I think, a major part of the office's ability to provide support and resources for folks in the community really hinges on, to Rafi's good point earlier, folks feeling safe enough to engage. And we know disproportionately that individuals from historically marginalized identities or backgrounds or experiences face additional barriers to help-seeking behaviors, face additional barriers to receiving adequate support in many ways. And so, that is something that is always kind of playing in my head. Not only how am I, to your good point, Fiona, not really thinking about how to use a trauma-informed approach when I'm in person, face-to-face with individuals, but also how are we accounting for the important role that folks' identities play, even in their willingness to reach out? Or how are we making sure that information is easily accessible enough or widely communicated throughout the campus community so that individuals can hear about options for support through a trusted friend or a trusted peer or a trusted faculty member that might prompt them to say, you know what, I'll make a call or I'll send an email. I think that, so much of my response is really hinges upon people's feelings of safety and even reaching out. And so I think being mindful of intersectionality and the barriers that folks face is a really important part of approaching the work.
I'm listening to y'all speak, and I'm thinking about a community member that called the hotline this morning. They engaged in consensual sexual activities overnight and woke up this morning with severe abdominal pain. And they went to an emergency room that I wouldn't have initially recommended for a queer person in New York City to go to. Respectfully, I will decline to give more detail than that. And for the record, my go-to is Savvy at Mount Sinai. Love Mount Sinai. But it was a really interesting experience because I had to support this community member in safety planning a decision that they made without knowing all the facts, without knowing all the options. And they were giving me updates every step of the way. They waited at least 6 hours to get care, only to be told by a doctor after I contacted the hospital's guest and patients relations, kind of laid down the law and told them that I work with AVP and I'm watching. That doesn't always work. They finally spoke to a doctor that was basically like, I'm gonna give you some antibiotics, send you home, some painkillers, and we'll see how that works. And I'm not in the business of telling people what to do, especially because we're an anti-violence organization that's trauma-informed, and our hotline is about option clarification, right? We believe that survivors are the experts in their own lives. So in my practice, I ask questions when I'm doing safety planning. And I asked them, I said, was this your first time going to the hospital? All right, you've been there before. Have experiences like that have been similar? Have you explored other options? Would you like some of those options? Thank you. Have you heard of this hospital? All right, that's actually not too far from where you're at. Have you considered going there? All right, this is your choice, but you should know that you do have a right to get a second opinion. And if the pain persists, or if you disagree with this person's initial diagnosis, you can ask for a second opinion or a differential diagnosis at a different hospital. Now, I cannot guarantee that you're going to get the same result, you're gonna wait the same time. I can't guarantee none of that. But what I can say is that with my experience at AVP, we've had more folks who've contacted our hotline or have received services from AVP call us back and say they received a more competent care or trauma-informed, trans-inclusive care there. I'm hoping that this person makes steps in that direction, because it is through these experiences that we learn the importance of intersectionality in our work. We learn that, you can have 5 different institutions that work as trauma centers on and off campus, hospitals, precincts, et cetera, right? Community centers, and all 5 spaces can have the same access to training and one-on-ones around how to support women of color, how to support people with disabilities, how to support trans inclusive communities, right? But each one can differentiate in the practice compared to the theory and in the ways that they're able to create systemic change within in order to provide survivors the safety needed or the accessibility needed to be able to bring all of themselves into an initial intake, or even to walk into the room and say, I need help, all of me needs help, right? There's so many barriers that they face, like discrimination, bias, assumptions, right? And that's only talking about identity, right? We haven't even begun talking about healthcare and the law and like other stuff that may be barriers.
Thank you so much. Rafi, you may have already addressed this already, but our next question is, how are individuals who hold overlapping marginalized identities limited from having their voices heard and holding their perpetrators accountable?
My experience when I've been called in for sexual assault cases, I have no idea how many I've seen in 30 years, but a lot. At Mount Sinai and at Montefiore, where I worked for many years, survivors have the option if they seek care and when they seek care. And the longest I have ever seen a patient from the time of the assault until the patient presented for care was 7 years. And at that point, there was nothing to do clinically except to hold the person's hand and support that person. But usually it's faster than that. A lot of people think you're assaulted, your next step is the ER. That's not necessarily true. And frequently there are days or even weeks that go by. I would say the overwhelming majority of patients I have worked with, and again, it's in the ED. So I have a window of opportunity with those people, and then I go home and I don't see them again. So I don't absolutely know. But in terms of giving the patient the option of, do you want the police involved? Do you want this evidence saved at Mount Sinai securely, which it is, and you have months to make the decision about what to do? The overwhelming majority of survivors I've cared for have chosen the second option. And so I think one of the issues is, and that's for everybody, that's across the board for all survivors. I've taken care of cisgender men, I've taken care of primarily cisgender women, people who are trans or gender minorities, the overwhelming majority of people who are Black or brown. And there's always a point at which any survivor, but particularly those who are marginalized, in my experience, express the concern that they won't be believed by anybody in the hospital. They won't be believed by the police. They won't even be believed by me. And I always tell them, you were raped because somebody raped you. It wasn't because of who you are or where you were or what you were wearing or what you drank or what you used. You're raped because somebody did that to you, which is horrible. But certainly people who are marginalized, particularly people who have been grievously served by our criminal justice system, have every reason to not trust the system we turn them over to and say, well, let's call the police and get you involved with that. Or for that matter, if that case is prosecuted and they go to trial, and I've testified at these events, what will happen at trial? Because many times, unfortunately, despite the best efforts that I've seen of the prosecutors, they're put on trial as well. And so I think when you are in a marginalized community, you come into this with even more weight on your shoulders about how to navigate this system, and will you be believed by everybody who follows.
I don't think I could say anything more important or eloquent than that.
I'm sure you could.
I think one of the things that's standing out to me, though, in kind of the various responses as we're having this conversation, is that I think that one of the really exciting things for me is that our work, though very different, seems to center on this philosophy that individuals have agency in their own pursuit of whatever care and justice looks like for them. And I think that that's one thing that I will frequently reiterate to folks who I speak with or work with, that what my responsibility is to make them aware of the full scope of options and resources and support available for them, and to provide support in their pursuit of whatever it is that will help in their process, right? And in some cases, that might mean working with students in particular to engage with their faculty members to communicate discreetly that we're connected and that they may need some extra flexibility on things like attendance or assignment submission. It could mean that I'm working with their class dean to talk about what a reduced course load might look like. For our employees, it could mean that we're engaging in safety planning and talking through what community-based resources or human resources support are available to them. And it doesn't always mean that we're talking about what an investigation might look like. And I think that it's one of the really heartening things I've observed so far in this conversation is that thread of personal agency and choice seems to be a really important part of the work that we're all doing.
Yeah, I mean, echoing what you both said, absolutely. I'm thinking about also the fear of outing. That's something that comes up often in my work and in LGBTQ and HIV affected communities, but also other underserved populations and marginalized communities, thinking about folks who are undocumented, folks who don't have insurance, folks living with assumed or perceived disabilities, visible or invisible. I think that there's a lot to think about when we're making assumptions about what it means to be a survivor or a victim. And, I would even name that as a barrier, right? The moment that someone makes the decision to talk to someone, to disclose their trauma, to seek support, whatever that looks like, they're making the decision to self-disclose that they are a survivor or a victim. And that with that, we may not see that as another marginalized identity or put that in the same category that white supremacy puts our race and our gender and all these other things. But that's the way that white supremacy and colonialism works. It makes you an other the moment that you are a survivor or a victim of any type of violence, especially sexual violence.
Yep, thank you for those insights. I feel like a lot of what each of you are saying is connecting with what the other two panelists are saying. So it's really wonderful to draw those connections. In the interest of time, we want to move on to talking about how to encourage college students as a specific demographic, since we're having this event on Barnard's campus and we have a lot of students in the room. So how would you encourage college students as a specific group to add on to this conversation on sexual violence?
I think being here, right, is a great start. College campuses are amazing environments that lend themselves to these types of conversations. I think, to be very candid, in ways that I wish happened outside of college campuses, right? I wish other professional and academic and social spaces had similar types of fora for these conversations. I think, there are folks who work in this space. I'm looking at Kristen Kennedy in the back of the room, right? I'm looking at Zaisha, who are consistently, myself included, seeking feedback about how we can make the work that we are engaging in better, more informed, more responsive, more attuned to the particular needs of at any given moment, right? we have the captive kind of audience that we have for a very brief time. We are a blip in your experience, and we want to make sure that we're tailoring what we do to support needs of individuals who are here at this particular moment, because what worked for students 5 years ago is likely very different than what works and what is responsive for individuals now. And so we need your voices, we need your feedback. When you see the surveys in your inbox, as time intensive as they are, take them, because I know it feels like they go into a void somewhere, but we are reading them. Shameless plug for the campus climate survey that was recently distributed. Those are really important ways to inform policy, to inform practice, and to make sure that we are doing right by you all, because you are who we are serving in this community.
I want to uplift the climate survey too. This is actually something that I'm only recently learning about in my work with AVP, because a part of my work with the Hotline program is I'm also the coordinator for the Enough is Enough initiative under OPDV. Don't ask me what that stands for, I'm so sorry. And but basically my work centers around supporting campus survivors of sexual violence, specifically in Manhattan, right? So I'm already connected to amazing people at Barnard like Zaisha and now Elizabeth and folks at Columbia, right? It's so important when students participate in the surveys and in the needs assessments that folks like myself from outside spaces will be sending out, right? I say this all the time, especially when I'm working with youth who are in that transitional period where they're about to become voting citizens, right? And they feel like their vote doesn't matter. I'm like, listen, however y'all feel, the moment that you check a box that people fought for that box to exist, that's an act of resistance of revolution, right? Like the census, the surveys, the needs assessments, they don't look the way they do now if it wasn't for the amazing energy in this space intergenerationally that led to the way that it looks today. Please build upon that, especially because a part of the feedback, they always ask, do you have information, like additional information? This is your turn as a part of the next generation of folks taking these surveys to say, I'm another box that needs to be included the next time y'all send the survey out. Then maybe more people will utilize that. And we're going to collect that information so that when the state asks someone like me, well, why is it that you're spending so much time at Barnard? Because their data is saying that they don't really need you as much as this other college needs you. I'm like, wait until the next survey and you'll see why. There you go.
Someone filled out, I don't know what you're calling it, that sign that people were writing on. And somebody, when I was wandering around looking at it, wrote stop, I don't know if it was stop or end rape culture. And I said to that person, that's exactly what this is about. Now, I realize I'm sharing 3 words with you. That's what you can do. It's a lot to put on your shoulders. But I think you look at what happened last week in Tennessee in the legislature, and I don't know if any of you has heard all 3 of those legislators, but particularly the 2 young men of color, the eloquence with which they spoke, their oratorical abilities, their commitment. They're 27 and 28 years old. And that's what this country needs desperately. I just registered about a week ago, I think, to attend the American Academy of Physician Assistants meeting that I haven't gone to in a long time, because I've been going to OBGYN meetings instead and speaking in places. And it's in Nashville. And on Thursday, I heard what happened. I was actually seeing patients, and I thought, why am I going to Tennessee? I'm sorry if any of you is from there. I mean, no offense, I'm serious, I don't. But then when I heard what happened, and I heard the speeches that those 2 young men gave, I thought, I'm glad I'm going there. I'm glad I'm going there to stand up for them and for what other people across the country are doing. This is a really scary time. It's a very scary time in my field, with what's going on, with what happened to mifepristone last week. I'm scared to death. And I'm very scared about what's going on for people of gender minorities, because they are the same issue. And anybody wants to know what that has to do with white supremacy, just talk to me afterward, because that has everything to do with it. So you are unfortunately who we're handing the baton to, and you have a lot of work to do. But I think you need to work from within now when you're on this campus and in the future, because you're desperately needed.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I'm curious what you believe the ways are that we can begin moving away from this harmful culture, and how do you individually attempt to carry out this vision in terms of the work you do?
Can I start this one? I feel very passionate about this. I think that the same energy in which we prioritize uplifting and creating safer spaces for survivors and having conversations that are centered around survivors, very important. Don't stop doing that. But we need to also keep that same energy towards prevention work. And we need to talk about, like, at a legislative level, at like a kindergarten level, we need to honestly, as a society, as cultures, have healthier conversations around boundaries and consent. And we need to decolonize and degender and all the things, all of these conversations, right? Because so much of the power and control wheel, so much of the conversations of power and privilege are deeply rooted in these cis heteronormative, like archaic idealisms that just don't exist in practice, right? They are all an illusion of power and privilege that's constantly being fed into. But the moment that we as a people start kind of like deviating, right, like diverging from these illusions of what is normal, of what is the standard, right? That's when we're going to start seeing change. And I think that this generation, Generation Z, Gen Z, Generation Alpha, right? They're proof of that. Look at what's happening with, social media being heavily, questioned by the government and all these things, right? I watch this happening in the news, C-SPAN or like whatever, social media apps and stuff. And the only thing I'm thinking about is, there they go, burning the books again. And they're stopping you from having access to education and from knowledge, the things that aren't a part of your syllabus or the things that people fought to add to the syllabus, right? And it's constantly evolving and it's constantly expanding. Don't let that expansion stop. Be a part of that expansion. Continue to work towards decolonizing the work that we're doing in order to end this culture. It's not just about crisis response, it's also about prevention.
I spend a lot of time talking to other people who do Title IX work specifically, who feel understandably really burdened by the changes, right? We over the past several years have gone through a time of a lot of regulatory change, and we are about to enter a moment of additional regulatory change, right? And that is hard. And it's hard to be responsive and appropriately responsive and to internalize all of the requirements and to make sure that you are engaging in a way that is appropriate and also align with regulatory requirements. And I think that people, in my opinion, sometimes where we fall short is that the conversation ends at how burdened people feel. And we don't think or burdened by the limitations, right? I'm limited in how I can do this. The law says I have to do this. The regulations say I have to do this way. And so frequently in Title IX spaces, we talk about, the regulation is the floor and we need to be looking towards the ceiling, right? There is a lot of leeway in how we approach the work, right? We might have responsibilities and obligations under the law. How we communicate those things, how we approach care for individuals, how we support appropriate prevention strategies are all highly, I would say, largely interpretive, right? Like we have a good amount of flexibility in how we get to those places. And I think that for me, finding the ceiling is one way that allows me to think about how we can start to do some of the work of dismantling what is a really harmful or what can be really, really harmful for folks.
Excuse me. I see the work I do concerning sexual assault through the lens of obstetrics and gynecology, because that's what I'm primarily focused on. But one thing that carries over from obstetrics into this field and other aspects of gynecology, there is an enormous, and I'm not just speaking of people who are cisgender women. This cuts across those boundaries as well. But there's an enormous amount of shame in talking about pregnancy loss, which I will not call miscarriage because I think that's a pejorative word, and with sexual assault, and with other conditions that you see in people assigned female at birth. And that works for people who want to keep marginalized people marginalized. If there's shame, there's secrecy, and you don't talk about those things. And I don't want to put anybody who is a survivor in a position of feeling like they must talk about it, but that they can talk about it. And that with that, I think, you know, there's a lot of truth to divide and conquer. And if people start unburdening themselves in the right space, in a safe place, if we make more places safe, perhaps we can work from within and try to undo those stereotypes and that power holding people who are marginalized back.
Thank you all so much. I really resonate with your remarks. As someone who has been an advocate for sexual violence prevention efforts since high school, I've found that the measures that my district did implement were very much for compliance reasons in response to being investigated by the Office of Civil Rights. And so I do really appreciate both your remarks about, you know, introducing the concept of healthy relationships at a younger age, and I guess advocating for, just advocating for more of a dialogue. And so I think we will now transition to questions from the audience.
Yeah, so we now have time set aside for questions from our audience, both in person and on Zoom. If you have any questions right now, just feel free to raise your hand. You can also put your question in the Q&A function on Zoom. So we'll just take a moment for anyone who has a question to, you know, collect their thoughts.
Anyone in the audience have any questions? Okay, the Zoom is empty for, oh, we do have a question.
Hello, my name is Caroline. As someone who identifies on the asexual spectrum, I was wondering if our panelists knew anything about the relationship between asexuality and sexual assault and how that could like kind of contribute to our conversation on intersectionality.
Hi, Caroline. Caroline, thanks for asking that question. Means a lot to me. Okay, so hard truth, right? The asexual and spectrum community is often left out of these conversations for a lot of reasons before we even get to conversations around sexual violence, and that needs to change. And even in my work, I can hold myself accountable and say that I need to do better. AVP's been an existing organization for over 40 years. I think we're 41 going on 42 years. And it wasn't until the recent decade that we even had in our hotline training included slides on folks from asexual, agender, and aromantic communities. And I advocated very hard on that, saying that if we're gonna have conversations about decolonizing race, gender, and sexuality, we need to start with decolonizing types of attractions and the relationships that we have with ourselves and the world around us, right? When it comes to conversations around the intersections of asexuality and sexual violence, in my experience from survivors who've disclosed or self-identify as such, one of the main barriers that come up is disbelief, but there's more nuance to it. It's not just about disbelief in the fact that they've experienced violence, but disbelief in their ability to consent or not consent, or to have agency over the participation and not like the non-participatory parts of it. And a lot of it has to do with ignorance, erasure, the minimization of identities, and misrepresentation. You know, so many of the services that are more mainstream for survivors of sexual violence are geared towards people who are allosexual or people who experience sexual attraction, right? In any way, shape, or form. It's going to be an uphill battle being able to change that. But I'm proud to say that I'm actively aspiring in allyship to try to be a part of those conversations. And I encourage more voices to be able to constantly bring that into these spaces and encourage us to make sure that it's not lost in the sauce and that it's an important part of the dialogue. Thank you.
If I could comment as well. Unfortunately, why did sexual assault forensic examiners start coming into existence? God bless you. Because this is my belief, because so many people in the emergency departments in the hospitals are very threatened when a patient comes in with sexual assault. They really are. And so they made us, because we, are trained in it and are continuing, have to have continuing education in the field, et cetera, et cetera. But I will pass on to you that one of the things I think about with a question like that is my concern when a person who identifies outside the heteronormative, cisnormative world, how will you be read in the ER, And that's something to think about as well. But thankfully, due to people like you who served as an advocate, and one of the best advocates I ever worked with was an 18-year-old high school student, a young man. I think that helps. And I think hospitals that do have programs like Savvy, which is a center of excellence, are more likely to be as welcoming as we can be. But I think that's something that people who don't know enough about these communities and the way people identify carry their own biases in when they see patients in the ER, in the hospital, in the office, in the clinic, across the board.
We have another question.
Hi, I'm Marina Catalazzi. I'm the Vice President for Health and Wellness at Barnard, and I just wanted to first wholeheartedly thank you for your really nuanced responses. I think one question that I have is, what do you think is the most important thing that a college campus can do to assure that students who are from minoritized populations can feel most comfortable accessing services, but also what can the campus do really just to highlight the importance of the work that Clery and Zaisha are doing? What do you think are kind of the priorities that we can put forth?
I think that one of the most valuable things that we can do administratively, right? A lot of the time the conversation kind of starts and ends at access, right? How do we increase access for these populations, for diverse or historically minoritized populations to come be a part of this community? And I think there's a lot of kind of subversive othering that happens when that's where we end the conversation. And so I think, how are we not only making sure that folks have important access, but I think to your good question, how do we make sure that when folks get here, we have appropriate infrastructure to support them? That we have clinicians who are trained and responsive, like I know that we do at the college, right, on specific barriers or specific challenges that are really niche to individual communities or across communities. I think, I think folks sometimes, especially I found having worked in several different institutions in New York City, we kind of rest on our laurels, right? That, oh, we're in New York, we have access to so many important resources, we can refer folks out, and that's absolutely true, but I think we also have a responsibility to make sure that we have the appropriate foundation to be able to support the folks that we're working so hard to bring into our communities. And that we're not bringing other folks into our communities, that we're making this their community, and a space that is hospitable and developmental in all of the ways that they need. Yeah, that's a really long-winded way to say, I think we need to build the table so that it's built for everyone, and that everyone not only has a seat, but that everyone has a seat that is right for them.
I think one other possibility, and I did my master's at Columbia many, many, many years ago, and I worked there for 5 years. So I cannot speak to the state of your health service, which I'm sure is superb. So I apologize, I don't know. But I think one thing that will help any community in which such services are offered is to strive to have the people who staff those services to represent their community, so that you've got a diverse population of people working there and serving them.
Thank you so much for that question and for your answers to that question. Are there any more questions from the audience? There were none on Zoom. Do you have one? Yeah.
Thank you all so much. I really, really appreciated this panel, the discussion with the Clery Fellows and our 3 panelists. I work in pedagogy, working with students and faculty. What's one thing you would want professors to know, right? Imagining that, almost every professor here will encounter, will have students in their class who have experienced or witnessed sexual violence. What's one thing you'd want them to know based on the work that you do?
So the first time I ever heard the word pedagogy, I received a book from an intern at my place of work, Paulo Freire's Pedagogy of the Oppressed. And as someone who had a really difficult time navigating school after high school, I didn't get a college degree. I was this close. And full disclosure, I experienced intimate partner violence. So I dropped out with a 4.0. And I hold that proudly. But it was a book that really resonated with me, because I think about how much conversations around anti-oppression work can reverberate in different institutions. And so much of my life revolves around people who are coming in and out of academia. Especially with having had the privilege to be surrounded by social workers. And I'm so grateful for all the tools they share with me so that I can elevate my ability to show up for community and survivors. If there's one thing that keeps coming up in trainings and workshops that I do with faculty, especially professors, teachers, right, on different campuses, it's you have to remember that you as an individual, as a part of the faculty, a professor, a lecturer, right, you are an option in a survivor's safety plan. Remember that. You are an option. There's not always going to be a lot of options, depending on the college, depending on their background, the makeup of the survivor, who they are, what they're navigating, right? But remember that from some period of time to another, they're going to be in a classroom with you. They're going to be in a lecture hall. They're going to have office hours, clinical hours, whatever, clerical hours, right? And they're going to reach out to you, whether you are the security person at the front gates of Barnard, or if you are the person who's teaching, this certain homeroom class or whatever that looks like for you, you are a safety plan. You might be the person that a student reaches out to and says, I need help, something happened. And you might be teaching math. And you're like, what's this got to do with me? I'm not an expert. But the fact that you're listening to this, the fact that you're connected to these services and to these experts, to these advocates, makes you a more prepared safety plan.
I think that, that's a really great question, Melissa. I think that one of the things that I would say, or the thing that I would say, is that incorporating these components into everyone's work is of critical importance, right? Inclusion, diversity, equity work is not this office's job, right? It's all of our responsibility to make sure that we are appropriately responsive to the needs of our community. And that means thinking about how, we teach math in the same way that, thinking how a historian approaches a particular topic in a lecture, to thinking about, how I engage with someone who may have experienced gender-based violence, right? It's all of our responsibility to incorporate that in the work that we do. It's not just this office over there that I send you to, and then I keep doing what I do.
As someone who is both a clinician and a professor, I very strongly believe that my patients inform my teaching informs my practice. And I've always served a population of people who are marginalized. My patients are almost all Black and brown, and they are pretty much economically challenged across the board. And so I talk about stuff in the classroom. Now, again, most of what I teach is OBGYN, but I teach other things too. And I bring up, I don't talk about sexual assault constantly, obviously, but I do talk about marginalized communities and how it informs medicine, and the way we practice medicine, and the way we, promulgate this bias over and over and over again in the practice of medicine. So that's what I do.
Thank you so much. So as we come up on time now, I first want to thank our lovely, lovely and amazing panelists for all of their insights, all of their words, and just the knowledge that they've given upon all of us tonight, both in person and on Zoom. So please, huge round of applause for our panelists. And we do, of course, want to show our appreciation, even though y'all said y'all didn't want anything. I'm not that kind of person, so this is yours. And then you all can head on to your tables. There we go. Yes, of course. And then Alexa is gonna tell us about some resources right before we get headed to our raffle.
While we hope tonight's event has motivated you to engage in violence prevention, we do recognize that it also might have been challenging. So we just want to remind you to take care of yourself and that there are resources available to you if and when you need them. A link will be posted in the Zoom chat. And for those of you here with us, you can find a list of resources on your table.
So to introduce our raffle, the book we've chosen is Chanel Miller's memoir. And so Zaija will be presenting the raffle, but the reason that we chose this specific book, Alexa and I, is because we felt like it really captured the story of someone who experienced sexual assault on a college campus. And since our theme, since our internship is intended to further violence prevention work on this campus and to support college students, we felt like this book was an appropriate choice. It's a deeply personal narrative. It's also the first time that I began really thinking about what Dr. Salzer talked about, the intersection of science and medicine and sexual assault. This book and Chanel Miller's experiences, that was the first time that I really started thinking about the intersection and what an individual who experienced sexual violence goes through in the immediate stages following the act of violence. And so we would highly, highly encourage everyone to read this book, even if you don't receive it as the prize for the raffle. I'm sure there's a copy around somewhere from a friend or someone around you, since it's hugely popular. So we would highly recommend giving it a read.
Again, round of applause, huge round of applause to our panelists. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. The three of you can pick up your books right by Fiona over there. We will ask that you hang around just so we can get a group picture for the books. But thank you so much to the panelists. And now, as I go on my thank you tour to everyone who's involved, you're good. Yeah. So huge thank you to our Clery interns and a huge round of applause to them, Fiona and Alexa. To Mrs. and Mr. Clery, whose advocacy and commitment to violence prevention made today possible. Thank you to our campus IMATS team for ensuring this event could be accessible regardless of people's location. So, as well as our AV team on campus, to Barnard Cars for making closed captioning available, to our campus events management for their ongoing support. Shout outs to Brent. If you don't know him, he was fantabulous and answered every single question, and I'm a person of many questions, so thank you to them. Thank you to facilities for setting up the room, communication and printing for designing, and I invite each and every one of you to continue engaging in Sexual Assault Awareness Month events. The most recent one is going to be this Friday, happening with Columbia Health Sexual Violence Response. They are hosting a Zoom dialogue on disrupting the culture of sexual violence. Please also save the date for Denim Day if it's not already on your calendar. It is Wednesday, April 26th. Please wear denim. If you are a student here, we're also going to be decorating and designing denim, so bring your denim. It's going to be with the MAC, Barnard MAC committee. So come to that. Also come and design your own tote bag with the design center on Denim Day. So lots of things happening. There are QR codes. So please, 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 thank you so much for joining us this evening. We also have to-go boxes if there's food left. We don't want to waste food, so please take food with you. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please also save the date for Denim Day if it's not already on your calendar. It is Wednesday, April 26th. Please wear denim. If you are a student here, we're also going to be decorating and designing denim, so bring your denim. It's going to be with the MAC, Barnard MAC committee. So come to that. Also come and design your own tote bag with the design center on Denim Day. So lots of things happening. There are QR codes. So please, 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 thank you so much for joining us this evening. We also have to-go boxes if there's food left. We don't want to waste food, so please take food with you. And thank you so much for joining us this evening. Please also save the date for Denim Day if it's not already on your calendar. It is Wednesday, April 26th. Please wear denim. If you are a student here, we're also going to be decorating and designing denim, so bring your denim. It's going to be with the MAC, Barnard MAC committee. So come to that. Also come and design your own tote bag with the design center on Denim Day. So lots of things happening. There are QR codes. So please, 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 thank you so much for joining us this evening. We also have to-go boxes if there's food left. We don't want to waste food, so please take food with you. And thank you so much for joining us this evening.